I still remember the day I found out like it was yesterday, even though it's been weeks now. My name's Jake, and I was married to Lisa for about 3 years before everything fell apart. We had a pretty normal life, or so I thought. She was the kind of woman who could be bitchy, sure, but she also knew how to charm her way around people, and I loved her for that. We were expecting our first kid, and I was doing everything I could to prepare. I even went as far as planning the nursery, picking out furniture, and trying to make everything perfect. She seemed excited too, at least on the surface. But looking back, there were little signs. She started acting oddly distant, canceling plans last minute or disappearing for hours and not telling me where she was going. She'd get tense when I brought up her phone or her emails, like she was hiding something. She'd snap at me a lot more than usual, and I caught her lying about stupid stuff, like where she was or who she was talking to. I remember one night, she got defensive when I asked about her phone, quickly shutting it and telling me she was tired and just wanted to sleep. I didn't push it then. I was busy with work and the pregnancy, and honestly, I didn't want to believe she might be hiding something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The deeper I looked, the more I noticed her phone always being glued to her hand, and her replies getting shorter and more dismissive. She'd make excuses about being busy with work, but her tone when she said it was different, like she was hiding something or just didn't want me to know. Little things like her sneaking out to take calls in the bathroom or having secretive conversations with her friends. I brushed it off at first, told myself she was just stressed or tired, but deep down, I knew I was missing something crucial. Then came the most obvious sign. One day I was cleaning up her purse, something I normally wouldn't do, but I was trying to surprise her with breakfast in bed. I found her phone hidden underneath some receipts, with messages from someone named Mark. The tone was flirty, familiar, and way too intimate. It was just friendly banter. They were talking about meeting up, about her needing a break, and how Mark was the only one who truly understood her. That was the moment I felt my stomach drop. It was like a punch to the gut. I knew then that Lisa had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure. I started paying closer attention, noticing how she was suddenly more secretive, more evasive. Her behavior changed even more, and I could tell she was hiding something. It was like living with a stranger, and my mind kept racing. Why? How could she do this to me, especially now when I was carrying her child? My trust was shattered, and I felt this overwhelming mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I wanted to believe she was just stressed or caught up in her own mess, but deep down, I knew the truth was much darker. She had been cheating on me, sleeping with her boss, Mark, during the entire pregnancy, and she had lied about it every step of the way. After I found the messages, I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there staring at the screen of my phone, trying to process what I'd seen. I kept thinking about everything. Her smiling at me when I told her I was excited about the baby, her kissing me on the cheek, pretending everything was normal. And right behind that image was her texting Mark late at night, talking about how much she needed him, how she couldn't wait to see him again, and all the dirty, explicit stuff that made my stomach turn. I kept replaying that moment over and over, feeling like I'd been punched again and again. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just ignore it. The first thing I did was talk to her. I remember confronting her in the living room, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. I was furious, hurt, disgusted. Every emotion hit me at once. I told her I knew about Mark, showed her the messages. Her reaction, she played it off like I was overreacting, like I was paranoid or imagining things. She told me, "You're crazy, Jake. You're just stressed with the pregnancy, that's all. Mark is just a coworker, nothing more. You're making a big deal out of nothing." She looked at me with that bitchy, dismissive look like I was wasting her time, but I wasn't buying it. I could see the lies in her eyes. She kept insisting she was just stressed and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. She made me feel like I was losing my mind for even suggesting she'd do something so horrible. I was boiling inside, but I kept my cool, at least for a little while. I didn't want to blow up and ruin everything in that moment. Instead, I told her I needed space, I needed to think. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and told me I was overreacting, like I was the one who had the problem. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head. The fact that she'd been lying all these months, while she was pregnant during what was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, made me feel sick. How could she do this to me? To our family? The betrayal cut so deep. I felt angry, yes, but mostly I was just heartbroken. I'd always thought she loved me, but now I wasn't sure if I ever really knew her. The next day I started digging further. I had to be sure. I installed a keylogger on her phone, knew it was risky, but I didn't care anymore. I had to have proof. I wanted to catch her in the act if she was still lying. It was humiliating to do this, but at that point I felt like I was fighting for my sanity. And sure enough, within a day or two, I caught her again. More texts, more plans to meet Mark. She was lying about the work trips she kept claiming she was on. She was still sneaking around behind my back, even while I was trying to be supportive, even while I was preparing everything for her and our baby. That's when I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I wasn't going to let her deny it or make me doubt myself anymore. I gathered all the evidence, screenshots, messages, the whole lot, and waited for her to come home. I felt furious, betrayed, and helpless all at the same time. The truth was out, and I didn't see how she could possibly lie her way out of this one. I was so close to losing my shit, but I knew I had to hold it together for my own sake and, honestly, for the sake of the baby. But inside, I was already planning what I was going to do next. When Lisa finally came home that evening, I was already sitting in the living room with everything laid out in front of me, screenshots, her phone, the messages I'd saved. She walked in, eyes darting around like she already knew what was coming. Her face twisted into that condescending smirk she always used when she thought she was winning an argument. "What's all this?" she asked, crossing her arms, her tone dripping with annoyance. I didn't waste time. I threw the evidence in her face and told her I knew exactly what she'd been doing behind my back, how she'd been sleeping with Mark during my pregnancy, how she lied to me, how she manipulated everything. Her reaction, she just rolled her eyes and sneered. "Oh, please. You're reading too much into this, Jake. You're just insecure because I'm pregnant. Honestly, you're overreacting again. Mark is just a boss, a coworker. We're just friends with benefits. That's all, don't be so dramatic." She looked at me like I was some sort of jealous fool, like she was totally unbothered, as if her actions were just some silly mistake she'd made and I was supposed to forgive her because she was stressed or whatever excuse she drummed up. I couldn't believe her. I felt like I was losing my mind. All the pain, the shock, the anger, it hit me like a freight train. How many times had she lied to my face? How long had she been sneaking around? The fact that she'd been sleeping with her boss, Mark, during the most vulnerable time of my life, it felt like a punch in the chest that I couldn't breathe through. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see how much she'd hurt me. But I stayed silent for a moment, just looking at her, trying to process everything. I told her she was done lying, that I couldn't stay with someone who would cheat on me while carrying my child. Her face twisted into that bitchy sneer again, and she said, "You're just overreacting. You're insecure. You're making a big deal out of nothing." As usual, I looked at her and realized she didn't even care, not really. She was just trying to gaslight me, turn it around, make me doubt myself. That's when I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay with her anymore. The trust was broken beyond repair. I told her I was leaving, that I was done with the lies, the cheating, the manipulation. She told me I was overreacting, that I was being unfair, that it was all just a misunderstanding, but I wasn't buying it. I saw the truth in her eyes, the guilt, the disdain. She didn't care about us, about the baby, about me. She cared about keeping her secret, about having her fun with Mark. That realization hit me hard. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that I finally knew the truth, and sadness that I had to walk away from someone I thought loved me. That night, I packed my bags and left. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew staying would only hurt me more. As I drove away from that house, I looked back at the life I thought we had, and I knew I'd never see it the same way again. I learned a lot from that experience, mostly that sometimes the people you trust the most can turn out to be the ones who hurt you the deepest. And no matter how much you want to believe in fairy tales, sometimes you just have to face the ugly truth and do what's best for yourself. After I left her house that night, everything felt surreal. The car ride was a blur, part relief, part devastation. I kept thinking about everything I'd uncovered, about the years we spent together and how blind I'd been to her lies. I knew I couldn't go back, not now, not after discovering she'd been sleeping with Mark behind my back during my pregnancy. That was the point of no return. All the plans I'd made, all the trust I'd given her, gone in an instant. I tried to focus on what I needed to do next, but honestly, my mind was a chaotic mess. I felt angry, betrayed, and numb all at once. I remember calling a friend, Sean, who's been through similar heartbreaks. He told me to take my time, to think about what I really wanted, but deep down I already knew I was done. No going back, no reconciliation, just moving on and figuring out how to rebuild my life from this shattered foundation. Over the next few days, I started sorting through everything: clothes, documents, the evidence I'd collected. I was trying to piece together how I'd missed so much, how I'd been so blind to her constant lies and dismissiveness. I also had to consider what this meant for the baby. I knew I couldn't be with Lisa anymore, but I still wanted to be present in my child's life. That was my priority now. I needed to stay strong, for my sake and for the baby's. The hardest part was dealing with the aftermath of her denial. Every time I called her to talk about the baby, she'd act like nothing was wrong. She'd pretend she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. She even had the nerve to ask me to keep things civil, as if I should just forget everything. But how could I forget? How could I forgive someone who'd lied to me for so long, who'd cheated on me with her boss, Mark, while she was pregnant? It felt impossible. I started to realize I wasn't the only one hurting. My parents, my friends, they all saw what she was doing and couldn't believe I'd stayed so long. Honestly, I was humiliated. Not just because she cheated, but because I stayed in that mess longer than I should have. I kept thinking about how I'd been so naive, so trusting, so willing to forgive her even after she blatantly lied to my face. It made me wonder what I missed. Was she always like this? Was I just too blind to see it? Or was I trying to ignore the truth because I didn't want to face the reality that my marriage was over? The next big challenge was figuring out how to move forward from here. I knew I couldn't fix what was broken. I'd been cheated on, lied to, betrayed at the worst possible moment of my life. I felt like I was just starting to rebuild my confidence, but every time I looked at her empty side of the bed, I felt the ache again. That emptiness, that sense of loss was overwhelming. I kept asking myself if I'd ever trust anyone again, or if I'd just be forever haunted by what she did and what I missed. But I also knew I had to get through it, for my son or daughter's sake. I didn't want to grow bitter or let her poison my heart. Slowly, I started talking to a lawyer about custody and what my options were. I knew I had to be prepared. I didn't want her to manipulate me or play the victim anymore. I wanted the truth out in the open, and I wanted to make sure I was doing right by my kid, even if that meant cutting her out of my life completely. It's a brutal lesson. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be the biggest liars. But I also learned that I have to be resilient, that I have to pick myself up and keep going, no matter how much it hurts. Weeks turned into months, and honestly, every day was a battle to keep my head above water. The initial shock and rage eventually faded into a dull ache, but the betrayal still haunted me. I'd thought I knew Lisa. I'd thought she was the woman I was going to raise a family with. Instead, I found out she'd been sneaking around with her boss, Mark, during my pregnancy, while I was trying to prepare for fatherhood and be a good husband. It felt like my entire world had been turned upside down. I threw myself into sorting out the legal side of things. I met with a lawyer, got my custody plan in motion, and made sure I was protected financially. I also started therapy because I realized I couldn't just suppress everything and pretend I was okay. I had to process this pain and figure out how to move on without letting it completely destroy me. The sessions helped, but some nights, the anger still boiled over. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face for so long and expect me to just forget? One thing I learned is that Lisa wasn't the person I thought she was. She kept trying to contact me, pretending she was innocent, playing the victim. She'd send messages, crying crocodile tears, begging for a second chance, claiming she was stressed and made a terrible mistake. But I saw through her. Every excuse, every tear was just another manipulation. She didn't care about us. She cared about her secret life with Mark, about keeping her lies intact. She wanted me to forgive her so she could go right back to doing what she was doing. I refused to let that happen. I also realized that I had to do what was best for my kid. No matter how much I was hurting, I wanted to be a good father and give our child stability. I decided to go for full custody because I didn't want her to have any influence over my child after the way she'd betrayed me. It wasn't an easy decision, and it tore me up inside to think about raising my kid alone, especially after everything. But I knew I could provide a better environment without her deception and toxicity hanging over us. I started taking steps to build a new life, finding a new place to live, focusing on work, and trying to heal. Meanwhile, Lisa's attempts to manipulate the situation only made me more resolute. She kept trying to play the victim, crying how she still loved me and wanted us to work it out, but I wasn't buying it. To me, her actions spoke louder than words. She betrayed the trust of her own family, of her child, and the man she supposedly loved. I kept asking myself why I stayed as long as I did, why I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt when she kept showing her true colors. The answer was simple. I wanted to believe in the fairy tale and the woman I married. But the truth was brutal. She was just a liar and a cheater. So now I'm in a position where I have to rebuild piece by piece. I've learned that trusting someone blindly can lead to heartbreak, that sometimes the ones you love the most can turn out to be your greatest betrayal. But I also learned I'm stronger than I thought. I have to be for my kid, for myself. It's not easy, and I still have days where I feel the weight of everything. But I'm trying to focus on the future, on healing. And most importantly, on making sure that I never let someone's lies destroy me again. The pain will fade, but the lessons will stay with me forever. Looking back now, I realize that this whole experience has changed me in ways I never expected. It's funny how someone you trust with your whole heart can turn out to be the one who breaks it in the worst ways possible. I thought I knew Lisa, thought she was the woman I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Turns out, she was just hiding her true self behind a pretty face and a fake smile. Her lies, her cheating, her manipulation, it all shattered any illusions I had about us. But in the midst of all this darkness, I found a strange kind of strength. I learned that I don't need someone like her to define my happiness or my worth. I learned that falling apart isn't the end of the world. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. I've become more cautious, more aware of the red flags I'd ignored for too long. I've learned to trust myself again, and I've started to rebuild a life that's based on honesty and respect, things I never fully appreciated before. Most of all, I've learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply living your life well after someone tries to ruin it. I refuse to let her betrayal keep me down forever. I'm focused on being the best father I can be, giving my child a stable, loving environment. I still have pain, sure, but that pain reminds me to be vigilant, to cherish honesty, and to never take love for granted. I want to tell anyone out there going through something similar, don't let one person's betrayal define you. Take the time to heal, to reflect, and to grow. It's okay to feel hurt, to cry, to be angry, but don't let those feelings consume you, because at the end of the day, you're stronger than any lie, any betrayal. And the best revenge is moving on and proving to yourself that you're capable of so much more than someone's deception could ever take away. So here I am, still standing, still breathing, still hopeful that the next chapter will be better, even if it's a little uncertain right now. I'll keep going because I have to, for my kid, for myself. And I know someday I'll look back at this and see it not as an ending, but as the painful but necessary start of something new.